Good evening, everyone. Hello, I'm Shari Werb, and I'm the director of the Library's Center for Learning, Literacy, and Engagement, and I'm pleased to welcome you here this evening for the presentation of the 2022 Rebecca Johnson Bobbitt National Prize for Poetry. Before we begin, let me remind you to please turn off your cell phones and any other electronic equipment that may interfere with tonight's program or with recording this event for the library's archive. We don't want to archive those sounds. I would like to thank the jurors for this year's Bobbitt Prize, who read through more than 200 poetry collections from 2020 and 2021. I would like to give them applause. This year's jurors were Betty Sue Flowers, selected by the Bobbitt family, Ilya Kaminsky, selected by the Librarian of Congress, and Laura Tohi, selected by former U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo. So thank you. I would also like to thank Dr. Philip C. Bobbitt for his generous gift that makes this prize possible. Please welcome Philip Bobbitt to the podium to give a few remarks about this prize.
Thank you. You can imagine what a happy occasion this is for me and for my family. The Rebecca Johnson Bobbitt National Prize for Poetry is in its 33rd year. 17 times it has been awarded, but only 16 times have we come together. In 2020, our own Annus Horribilis, the ceremony was virtual, but now we can come together again, blinking in the light after we have left the darkness of our plague years. I've been asked to limit my remarks tonight so we can get to the main event, and I have reluctantly concluded that the people watching this program and here tonight have come to hear Rita Dove and Hyde Edrick, and not the persons introducing them. So I'll confine my words to saying something about my mother, for whom the prize is named. Becky Johnson of Johnson City, as she was when she met my father here at the Library of Congress in the 1930s. My parents' story is a Washington story. Here they fell in love during the Depression. Here they reluctantly left when war began. My mother didn't really want to leave Washington. One of her suitors had bribed the orchestra leader at the Shoreham to play the Yellow Rose of Texas whenever she came into the ballroom. And she wasn't going to get that in Austin. She had escaped Texas, and she wasn't entirely ready to return. But they eloped to Mexico. They lived together mainly in Texas for 38 years until her death. When she died, I found a cache of some unusual index cards in a pigeonhole in her green writing desk. Each card had a hole drilled in the center of the top line, and on each was typed a poetry, or sometimes a lofty saying. I took them all to my father and I said, "What are these cards?" He said, "You remember that I met your mother at the Library of Congress when we were both working our way through school. My father had won a scholarship to come east to college from Texas. My mother was studying library science, as it was called then. My father said to me, 'You know your mother was engaged to another man who we first met.' Yes, I sort of remember that. Princeton graduate, I recall. Well, I had to dislodge this fellow. But the only time I saw your mother was at work, and we had a very strict supervisor. We worked in cataloging. Those cards are from the card catalogs. That explains the holes that really were at the bottom, not at the top. And we would exchange notes as if we were typing in reference information." Ever since I heard that story, I've had a real affection for the Dewey Decimal System. My father and I sat and we talked, and out of that, a long conversation, came the idea of the Poetry Prize here at the library. A prize which, as I said, is now in its 33rd year. 33 is an unusual number, the sum of factors of 2 primes, 3 and 11. Our eldest child is almost 11 now. His 2 youngest sisters are 3. How my mother would have delighted them, and how they, who have so much of her love of fun and her esprit, would have conspired with her. When my mother was 33, she'd come back to Texas with my father, anxiously awaiting the war that swept upon us. My father would enlist as a private, though some sensational scores on the mass test then being newly administered to recruits moved him to an OCS boot camp. The awful clouds came, but then they eventually parted. I pray that will be the case for us now at the end of this terrible interlude. Did the judges have in mind, when they chose these two such inspiring and illuminating poets, one of whom wrote Playlists from the Apocalypse, did they have in mind this terrible period and how we might be led out of it? How could they not? I thank them, and I thank the library for hosting this event, and too for hosting those 2 young people so many years ago. For without this grand institution and its industrious staffers and scholars, I wouldn't be here.
Thank you. Many thanks, Philip, for supporting the Library of Congress and our efforts to promote poetry with this prize in your mother's honor. And thank you for the romantic story as well. I'm pleased tonight to introduce our winners for the 2022 Rebecca Johnson Bobbitt National Prize for Poetry, Rita Dove and Hyde E. Erdrich. The Bobbitt Prize recognizes the most distinguished book of poetry by an American published during the preceding 2 years and/or the lifetime achievement of an American poet. Since the biennial prize was first given in 1990, it has honored both a winner for Best Book and for Lifetime Achievement 4 times. Our first reader tonight, Hyde Erdrich, is the author of 6 poetry collections and a nonfiction Indigenous foods book, as well as the editor of poetry anthology New Poets of Native Nations. She is Ojibwe and an enrolled member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa. Erdrich's Bobbitt Prize-winning book, Little Big Bully, was published by Penguin Books as part of its Penguin Poetry series in 2020. In their citation for the prize, the jury stated, Hyde Erdrich's poems are not sentimentalized on the indigenous, the spiritual, the victim, or the usual tropes. Rather, she voices the way bullying begins and continues, racial injustice, brutality, colonization, and environmental injustice, with fresh metaphors and even humor. She writes across the breadth of the U.S.'s collective history with Indigenous peoples using historical terminology that reaches into the heart of tribal sovereign existence. Yet, there is the underlying awareness that Indigenous nations maintain a unique history and have tribal narratives that shape their lives. Her poems are lyrical, visual, and at times, achingly personal. Please join me in welcoming Hyde Erdrich.
Bonjour, Indanawe Magani dog, Bonjour, Nijin Shadabe dog, Hyde Erdrich, Indigenakaz, Yaganashimong, Majikwe Indigo. My name is Hyde Erdrich, and I wanted to speak those words in the language of my grandfather, Anishinaabe Moen. My grandfather came to Washington in 1954 and 57 to save our tribe from termination from the federal government relationship that gives us our sovereignty. And I'm very proud to be here today. I have notes, so I won't get emotional. But I can't promise not to tip my water over. When I thank people for this book, I start with thanking my daughter Eliza, who stayed with me throughout the polar vortex of 2019 when there were 10 days of below freezing, well below freezing, sub-zero temperatures. So I have to start there because I never would have sat and written under a blanket in front of a heater at the pace I did if it hadn't been for my daughter being there. There's a story of Ojibwe people have that includes a young girl killing a giant made of ice, and so I dedicate it to her in that spirit. I have to thank Dr. Bobbitt tonight for telling us the story of how this prize came about and the story of the love of your parents. I was thinking of that when I selected poems tonight, and I decided that I would read mostly love poems, although this is a book about oppression and abuse. There is no other way to escape oppression and abuse than to tell your story to those who love you and not to the one who does not. I have to switch the glasses too. It's a whole rigmarole up here. I also need to thank Laura Tohi, Ilya Kaminsky, and Betty Sue Flowers for picking me, Rob Casper, who had to convince me for like an entire week or more that it was actually true and that he hadn't just called me to punk me. It meant so much to me because this book came out in 2020 and I wasn't able to take it out into the world and to give to an audience what they give back to me. And so I'm really, really grateful to be here with you all doing this tonight. Also to my husband, John Burke, again and forever, and who has been the best husband a poet could have. Ever since we met in Baltimore, and he decided he wanted to marry a poet before he met me, so luckily I just stepped right in. And all the staff today, and it's an honor to read here with Rita Dove. Thank you all so much. It's just been amazing. I wrote some of this, I didn't write some of this at Hedgebrook. I got a residency to Hedgebrook and I couldn't really write while I was there. And I thought about it. And then in Vermont Studio Center, I revised it, so thank them. And I'm also thanking the INAPO, Indigenous Native Poets Organization, for the retreat here in 2020 in this very room, and it was greatness, the moment that Native writers got together to work with young writers coming up and to celebrate fellowship. So the first love poem in the book is a love poem around sovereignty, but it's personal sovereignty, not the sovereignty of nations. Sovereign love. When I look upon the beloved, the real beloved, not the beloved of memoirs made up in revenge, but the active generator of love, the love maker. When I look upon you, beloved, I might avert my gaze. Let it stray only to your hands, then up to your throat. It is only in holding your eyes away from mine that I can stay sovereign in my love. It is only for you, not from you. It is more than state or nation. This love is itself unto itself. The only name it needs, it speaks within me. Call it what you will. It will answer. I was also thinking about Elizabeth Cady Stanton's Soul and Sovereign Love, and the soul and sovereign self. I realize the sound people are like, she just moved away from the microphone. I will stay here. This poem is called Variations True. Oh, I should say, aside from being Ojibwe, I'm also German American on my father's side, and I once went to Germany with him in the 1970s. It was an interesting experience. Subtle color variations of lilac keep coming back to me. Late 1970s, I asked my adult cousins in Germany, "What did you do in the war?" "We were young," they said. "We didn't know." "All was normal," they said. Normal auf Deutsch. "We took our bikes," they said, "out to the Stadt, the city. They went to gather flowers. Some seasonal fest they biked to dance, to eat, to sing. I imagine them in wide skirts with aprons, maybe, on curvy bikes with wire baskets, filled with lilac blossoms, overflowing and abundant and all the young things. I imagine them pedaling back on a day that happens later, but time collapses in these instances, and I see them breaking heavily when they find the city ruined. Then they run to the river. That actually happened. Survive waves of flame. Too late for my father's grandparents, already dead in the rubble, buried in debris. The city later piled into an enormous hill that grew over green and inviting along the same paths my cousins biked, and recalled when I asked, "What did you do?" "Normal," they said. I never understood, instead kept lilacs in my head, so many pinks and faded inky purples that turn blue in age, so many stages of one bloom that might not even grow there, but my mind maybe stood lilac as a substitute for a German word. Normal, they said. I never knew how many variations of a vision we can spin to make one image that might not even have been true, but now is now, and now I know we do. This is a poem out of what happened in my home state of North Dakota when people were visiting Standing Rock to support the protests against the pipeline that was going through, the DAPL pipeline. I grew up in North Dakota, so that was a very personal thing to me to see what was happening there. Many, many people came from all over, tens of thousands. When people came back from living at Standing Rock in the camps, many of them had injuries that were really difficult to explain, and some of them were not physical injuries that you could see, but from the sound cannons that were used against them, against American civilians living in camps. The sound cannons cause auditory hallucinations. And it has a funny name. Territory was not virgin, and neither was I virgin. Born, overflowing, all giving, you never could take what we never gave. Sky fat with rain, water dropping my name slowly on my lips. No part of me you could remove from the water. She touches everything, never alone, so even what broke blew up. Bomb of droplets, collective thunder sounding, resounding. No wonder you grew afraid. My voice refused you, all of you. Erased even the names, faces, places they tried to take us, so only a steady music remains, the urgency of rain. Neither could you take it with your cannon that turns sound against bodies, profound vibration, shot through bone, shock to the ears, the brain, the dreams. Or water cannons, water usurped, turned to weapon, turned to ice, turned to burn. They waded away with water, took water back, dispersed the hurt across the globe of water, the only territory, the only country, the only kinship, the one we would not give. If we give ourselves to anything, we give ourselves to water. If I give myself to anything, I give myself to water, not bride or prize or slave, but daughter, then grown woman, then wave next to wave next to wave, no more yours than rain, rain dropping slowly, so even you could hear it, knows you, it knows your name. And then I'll read one funny one and then a poem in the last section. Well, it's supposed to be funny, but it was the last poem I put in the book. I had to turn it in March of 2020. And I thought, this will make no sense in 6 months, unless I put something in about what we're doing now. So, face to face. How can you stop touching your face when I can barely resist touching your face? It's the septum I crave. And now, but for now, our quarantine is Joker taunting Batman. It's right under your nose. We've seen nothing like this all our long days between us. Every question unanswered makes me want to coax the words, stroke your, I look it up, philtrum, love charm. Oh, I can withhold, my touch retreats from your eminence, your arch, your cheek plate, chin orbit, brow ridge, temples, your notch, your fossa, the basin of tears. Your lobe, your canal, no, these do not so much tempt me, but that shape, that dip, tenderest of ports my pinky fits, where spirit pushed a fingertip into the clay of us, hushed us with a touch, so we could not tell what happened before we were born. In order to be born, in order to shine the way your eyes, oh, stop it with your eyes. Your eyes just lead me to your smile, then above to that Cupid's bow. I wish and wish I could plant a kiss, draw all that forgotten knowledge out. But so many touches undone, murdered between want and what we must. We close our eyes in 2 beds. Too much risk to sleep foot to head and breathe our dreams into the one thing they once were, truly not knowing we will ever be again. And then I'm going to finish with one of the poems at the end of the book, the very end of the book, and to thank my editor, Paul Smeltzer at Penguin, and Amy Gersler, who picked this book in the National Poetry Series. Paul moved this poem to the back. He said, there's only one thing I want to do, and I want the book to end with this poem. And it's called Reprieve. We did not expect the light to break into prison and the earth to cool. A new deluge, knowledge. We waited, praised, so much we did not know. We missed the purple of snow shadow, but kept snow. Our skins struggled into iridescence. Everyone grew new. We knew not who walked among us. Locks dropped off. Some felt a loss. Clocks stopped. They shut up days, walked out nights. Some gave up when Jesus did not come. Fine, we thought, we're through with dying. Now this shimmer, everlasting lake of time, where every child born is ours, every child mine. Thank you again.
Thank you, Hyde. It's hard to follow. Such a powerful speaker. And now I would like to introduce Rita Dove, receiving this year's Bobbitt Prize for Lifetime Achievement. Dove is one of the country's most celebrated poets. Her 11 poetry collections include Thomas and Beulah, winner of the 1987 Pulitzer Prize, Sonata Mulattica, and collected poems 1974 to 2004. The Bobbitt Prize jury read Dove's newest collection, Playlist from the Apocalypse, Poems, which was published in 2021. Their citation states that it is quintessential Rita Dove, ethical and lyrical, moving in and out of the whirlwind that is history, playful in her use of form, sonnets, odes, addresses, invocations, obads, and generous in her gathering of different voices and tribes to her pages. But in this book, there is also something novel and personal. In awarding her the 2022 Bobbitt Prize for Lifetime Achievement, our jury feels that her new collection, as well as Rita Dove's dazzling decades-long work in poetry, brings honor to this prize. Among Dove's other many honors and accomplishments, I want to mention that she received the National Humanities Medal from President Clinton in 1996 and the National Medal of the Arts from President Obama in 2011. Almost 30 years after she was named our 7th Poet Laureate Consultant in Poetry, we are thrilled and delighted to honor her for all that she has achieved throughout her full career. Please join me in welcoming Rita Dove.
Thank you.
Thank you. It is wonderful to be back here. And it is such a delight for me to be able to read with Hyde Erdrich. It was a phenomenal reading, and it is a hard act to follow. I'm so happy that there are, to look out here and see so many people who love poetry. I want to thank the Bobbitt family for making this possible. And I love that love story. I mean, I can think of nothing more perfect than to meet over books and library cards. It's fantastic. The Playlist for the Apocalypse was a book which found its growth, its coming together during the pandemic. Many of the poems had been lingering or malingering, I guess you could say, in the stasis, and then suddenly the world stopped, as we know, and everyone had to come to terms. We all had to come to terms with ourselves, right? Suddenly there was no one else. And that helped this book get written, and parts of the book get written. Some of the parts were already written. One of the poems, which was done before that and had been looking for its home, is a poem that takes place in the town of I guess you could say my adopted hometown. This is Charlottesville, Virginia, at the University of Virginia, where I teach. And the rotunda, which, of course, it's the Jefferson's University, and we're in Jefferson Hall, and so I thought it was only appropriate to start there right now. But the rotunda at the university was a place which was the home to a man by the name of Henry Martin. Henry Martin was born a slave at Monticello, Jefferson's estate. And he died on the same day that he was born on the day that Jefferson died, July 4th. He rang the bell in the rotunda for most of his life, over 50 years of his working life. And that was their way of keeping time. So this poem is spoken in his voice. It has an epigraph: I am as true to that bell as to my God. Bell ringer. I was given a name. It came out of a book. I don't know which. I've been told the great man could recite every title in order on its shelf. Well, I was born, and that's a good thing. Although I arrived on the day of his passing, a day on which our country fell into mourning. This I heard over and over from professors to farmers, even dual-scarred students. Sometimes, in grand company, remarked upon in third person, a pretty way of saying more than two men in a room means the third can be ignored, as I was when they spoke of my birth and Mr. Jefferson's death in one breath, voices dusted with wonderment, faint sunlight quivering on a hidden breeze. I listen in on the lectures whenever I can, holding still until I disappear beyond third person. And what I hear sounds right enough. It eases my mind. I know my appearance frightens some of the boys. The high cheeks and freckles and not quite Negro eyes, flaring gray as storm-washed skies back home. It shames them to be reminded. So much for book learning. I nod as if to say, Uncle Henry, at your service, then continue on my way through darkness to start the day. This is my place, stone rookery perched above the citadels of knowledge, alone with the bats and my bell, keeping time. Up here, molten glory brims until my head's rinsed clear. I am no longer a dreadful coincidence, nor debt crossed off in a dead man's ledger. I am not summoned, dismissed. I am the clock's keeper. I ring in their ears, and every hour, down in that shining, blistered republic, someone will pause to whisper, Henry, and for a moment, my name flies free. That was Henry Charlottesville. My Charlottesville is a very different place, or perhaps not so different. This poem takes place before the statues came down and before the Nazi-inspired or infused, you could say, troops kind of raided the town. But the statues were there and were a daily insult as one went through. Pedestrian crossing, Charlottesville. A gaggle of girls giggle over the bricks leading off Court Square. We break dutifully and wait. But there's at least 20 of these knob-kneed creatures, blonde and curly, still at an age that thinks impudence is cute. Look how they dart and dither, changing flanks as they lurch along, golden gobbets of infuriating foolishness or pure joy, depending on one's disposition. At the moment, mine's sour. This is taking far too long. Don't they have minders? Just behind my shoulder in the city park, the Southern General still stands, stonewalling us all. When I was their age, I judged Goldilocks nothing more than a pint-sized criminal who flounced into others' lives, then assumed their clemency. Unfair, I know, my aggression, to lump them into a gaggle, silly geese, when all they're guilty of is being young. So far. I warned you, my disposition was sour. There's so many reunions that are happening here. I mean, I walked through the library today, and it was like walking through multiple layers of experience. I just kept remembering things. My husband, who's here too, kept saying, remember that, remember that? And I said, yes, yes, and no, no, and I don't know. It feels so good to be back. It really does. I have family in Washington, and my mother's family came up from Washington to Akron, Ohio, following the industry that was there, which was the rubber companies at the time. But when we got together for family reunions, and these reunions usually revolved around barbecues, picnics, it all just kind of came together again. Family reunion. 30 seconds into the barbecue, my Cleveland cousins have everyone speaking Southern. Broadened vowels and dropped consonants, whoops and caws. It's more osmosis than magic, a sliding thrall back to a time when working the tire factories meant entire neighborhoods coming up from Georgia or Tennessee, accents helplessly intact, while their children, inflections flattened to match the field they thought they were playing on, knew without asking when it was safe to roll out a drawl. Just as it's understood, potluck means resurrecting the food we've abandoned along the way for the sake of sleeker thighs. I look over the yard to the porch with its battalion of aunts, the wavering ranks of uncles at the grill. Everywhere else, hordes of progeny are swirling, and my cousins yakking on as if they were waist deep in quicksand, but like the books recommend, aren't moving until someone hauls them free. Who are all these children? Who had them, and with whom? Through the general coffee tones, the shamed genetics cut a creamy swath. Cherokee's burnt umber transposed onto generous lips, a glance flares gray above the crushed nose we label anonymous African. It's all here, the beautiful geometry of Mendel's peas and their grim logic. And though we remain clearly divided on the merits of okra, there's still time to demolish the cheese grits and tear into slow-cooked ribs so tender we agree they're worth the extra pound or two our menfolk swear will always bring them home. Pity the poor soul who lives a life without butter. Those pinched knees and tennis shoulders and hatchety smiles. My mother passed away right before the pandemic, on the eve of it, but before that she had a very long decline, and my brother, who was 2 years older than I am, and we grew up kind of hand in hand, but he took care of her, and my aging father as well. I would call home every night and to Ohio and talk with my brother and ask him how my mother was doing. Eurydice, turning. Each evening, I call home, and my brother answers. Each evening, my rote patter, his unfailing cheer, until he swivels, leans in louder. It's your daughter, Mom. Want to say hello to Rita? My surprise each time that he still asks, believes in asking. Hello, Rita. A good day, then. The voice is fresh as I remember. I close my eyes to savor it, but don't need the dark to see her, younger than my daughter now, wasp-waisted in her home-sewn coral satin, with all of bebop yet to boogie through. No wonder Orpheus, when he heard the voice he'd played his lyre for in the only season of his life that mattered, could not believe she was anything but who she'd always been to him, for him. Silence, open air. I know what's coming. Wait for my brother's, okay, now say goodbye, Mom. and her parroted reply, "Goodbye, Mom." That lucid, ghastly singing. I put myself back into a trance and keep talking. Weather, gossip, news. My daughter, who now has a daughter of her own, I still don't believe that. Anyway, she used to come to the library all the time. She was everybody kind of knew her. She got to just hang out among books, which I thought was a fantastic thing. But when she was younger than that, about 5 or 6, she used to stomp through the house saying that nobody loved her but the spring cricket. And, you know, it hurts a mother's heart. But what I decided to do was to find out who this spring cricket was. So here's a poem. There's a whole section in the book about the spring cricket. Here's the first one. The spring cricket considers the question of negritude. I was playing my tunes all by myself. I didn't know anybody else who could play along. Sure, the tunes were sad, but sweet too, and wouldn't come until the day gave out. You know that way the sky has of dangling her last bright wisps? That's when the ache would bloom inside until I couldn't wait. I knelt down to scrape myself clean and didn't care who heard. Then came the shouts and whistles, the roundup into jars, a clamber of legs. Now there were others, tumbled, clouded. I didn't know their names. We were a musical lantern. Children slept to our rasping sighs. And if now and then one of us shook free and sang as he climbed to the brim, he would always fall again, which made them laugh and clap their hands. At least then we knew what pleased them and where the brink was. There are several sections in this book, and I'll come back to the spring crickets. I don't think I'm done with the spring cricket, actually. He's pretty, he would tell me, you know, what he wanted to say. But these next poems, I'm going to read you 3 short poems from this section, which is called A Standing Witness. And it all came about because a wonderful composer by the name of Richard Daniel Poor wrote me out of the blue and said, would you collaborate on a song cycle? And I said, well, what's the song cycle supposed to be about? And he said, well, the last 50, 60 years of American history. Nothing small. It was the challenge of that, but also the notion that Susan Graham was going to be singing this amazing cycle that kept me going, and I could just hear her mezzo while I was working on these poems. I'll read you 3 of the poems, and they do. One of the things that was interesting was that we had to sit there and decide what events do you want to document in this, and all of the ones that we left out are aching inside of me. But I will start with the prologue. It's called Beside the Golden Door, and each of the titles is taken from Emma Lazarus' poem at the Statue of Liberty. Beside the Golden Door. Surely there must be something beautiful to smile upon. The umbered blue edge of sky as it fades into evening, the brusque green heave of the sea. When I look up, surely there will be a cloud or a lone star dangling. Truth is, the truth has gone walking, left her perch for the doves and ravens to ravage, hightailed it to the hills, to the quiet beyond rivers and trees. No matter what ragged carnival may be thronging the streets, what bleak homestead or plantation of sorrows howling its dominion, truth will say these are arrogant times. Believers slaughter their doubters, while the greedy oil their lips with excuses, and the righteous turn merciless, the merciful mad. The first testimony, you're tired, you're poor, 1968. It was a year of multiple tragedies and assassinations. Who comforts you now that the wheel has broken? No more princes for the poor, loss whittling you thin. Grief is the constant now, hope the last word spoken. In a dance of two elegies, which circles the drain? A token year with its daisies and carbines is where we begin. Who comforts you now? That the wheel has broken is Mechanics 101. To keep dreaming when the joke's on you? Well, crazier legends have been written. Grief is the constant now. Hope, the last word spoken on a motel balcony, shouted in a hotel kitchen. No kin can make this journey for you. The roots locked in. Who comforts you now that the wheel has broken the bodies of its makers? Beyond the smoke and ashes, what you hear rising is nothing but the wind. Who comforts you now that the wheel has broken? Grief is the constant. Hope, the last word spoken. And the fifth testimony, woman aflame, Roe v. Wade. She was a mother. She was a girl who dreamed of becoming a mother someday. She was either a tease or a tramp, a lover or a wife. Still, she had to do the counting, was accused of lacking spontaneity, being a cold-hearted bitch. But if the days didn't add up, she'd end up straddling a cold table in a dingy back room or waving goodbye future. She was jogging on the late shift, unlocking her car. And though she still remembered the tart smack of his sweat when he held her down, horseradish on his tongue, none of this was she permitted to say, while lawyers argued her right to privacy, citing statute and precedent, until the court declared enough, and she and her body were free to go. There are happy ones in there too, but you can go look for them later. I'm going to, I think I'll have to lead us down one more step further. There's a section in this book called A Little Book of Woe, which these poems have been accruing over the years, and I did not want to actually publish them or anything until my parents, I didn't want to burden my parents who are already in poor health. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis about 20 years ago or so, even more. And I'm doing fine, but it was touch and go at first. And these poems are kind of a document of that. I'll read you the first one, which is called Soup. When the doctor said, "I've got good news and bad news," I thought of soup. How long it had been since I had had the homemade kind, the real deal where you soak the beans overnight and everything is apportioned in stages. First the onions and meat browned in oil, then the broth added for hours of simmering, all that saturated, glistening scent stoking the house with memories. The Jewish boy I kissed until we both sank to our knees in the grass, my mother's frown as she plucked weeds from my hair. Oh, my mother will die from this, my mother whose soup is the best, even though it was always oversalted, because it was labored over. It was ladled out unconditionally, tendered sweetly, without consequences, a non-judicial love. and it was always soup I got first thing in the sick bed. And there's the way tomatoes are added at the last moment, but the minor vegetables, peas and corn and tiny diced potatoes, come in 30 minutes before that. And how the spices are to be doled out sparingly, then waiting to see how strong they become in the brew, their hidden aptitudes unlocked only by time and the heat of a burbling melange. And the way my apron always got stained, but I wouldn't wash it, proud of the mess for once, making mistakes, sloshing and dripping. Yes, soup was what I wanted. Not news, but the slow courage of the lentil as it softened, its heart splitting into wings. Not good cop, bad cop, but the swift metallic smack of too much time administered hastily, the kind of mistake you never made again. Bread, too. I wanted the whole thick, crusty lump of it laid out for vivisection. Here is my body, eat. And lots of red wine that always feels like it's greasing my bones with lava. Here is my blood. And then the bad news came. Whoever listens to the good? And before I answered, before the questions and the arched eyebrow of my husband standing in the doorway could fall into pity and helplessness, I thought, yes, I'll make soup tonight, a soup fit for the gods. And I will end with, I promised to come back to the spring crickets, and so I'm going to come back to this poem, which is the last one in this sequence, though, like I said, he said I'm coming back. It has an epigraph from the opera Cendrillon from Cinderella, Stay by the Hearth, Little Cricket. Postlude. You prefer me invisible, no more than a crisp salute far away from your silks and firewood and woolens. Out of sight, I'm merely an annoyance, one slim, obstinate wrinkle in night's deepening trance. When sleep fails, you wish me shushed and back in my hole. As usual, you're not listening. Time stops only if you stop long enough to hear it passing. This is my business. I've got 10 weeks left to croon through. What you hear is a lifetime of song. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you, Rita. And now to end this wonderful event, let me bring Mr. Bobbitt and our prize-winning poets back up on stage. On behalf of the Library of Congress, I am pleased to award the 2022 Rebecca Johnson National Prize for Poetry to Rita Dove for Lifetime Achievement. And to Hyde Ehrlich for the best book of poetry. I hope you will all stay to get copies of our winners' books signed, and we hope to see you again for our Live at the Library series every Thursday night here in the Jefferson Building. Thank you all.